my dissertation project, and when I was putting together this presentation, I realized that probably the title that I chose was not portraying the full work that we're doing in Sun Silver Research Station, and also that now we're doing along the Pacific Flyway. But you know, these things happen. So I decided to start for the very beginning in this talk. So this is birds. So when you take a look at a bird, you're going to note a few things, right? Like the first thing you're going to note is that they have feathers. And immediately after that, probably you get too close to that bird and it's going to fly away because they have wings, right? And all birds have wings, except for the poor little kiwi that we're not going to talk about that one today. It's cute, but we're not going to talk about it. But those wings and that capacity to fly is what gives birds one of the most amazing characteristics, that is migration. You know, migration are this cyclic movement between two different locations that are seasonal, that are predictable, and there are many animals that undergo this migration. We have from insects to plankton in the sea. We have the whales. We have monarch butterflies that are right now in Michoacan overwintering. But it is in birds where migration reaches its most outstanding sorry, what is the most amazing journeys that we have. And there are multiple reasons why birds migrate. Birds migrate mostly because they are following food. They are following abundance, peaks in food resources. Whether it is fruit, whether it is insects, birds are taking advantage of these peaks in food resources when it happens in the north part of the breeding range, or in the south part of the overwintering range. There's also birds are avoiding harsh conditions. They are avoiding the harsh conditions of the winter in the northern hemisphere, and they are avoiding the wet season in the south. There is also birds are trying to avoid competition, either competition by their own kind or competition among other different species. And birds finally are trying to avoid predation. Birds move because they are able to find places where predation is not as high. They typically are trying to maximize their fitness, that it's the number of offspring they are producing, while minimizing the risk of dying on the attempt. And this is how bird migration looks in North America. I'm using Western Tanagers as an example because I'm going to be talking a lot of Western Tanagers, but this is the distribution range of Western Tanagers. In the breeding range, that typically occurs, find a mate, they build a nest, and they lay the eggs and raise their chicks. When the fall is starting to come, when temperatures start dropping, they run away from the cold, they run away from the depleted food resources, and fly to the south. Then they reach to the paradisiac lands in the south, where they can feed in all the goods that the tropics have to offer, and they can survive the harsh winter that otherwise will kill them if they stay in the north. So they spend 4 to 6 months in the south, and then when the spring is coming, they know it's time to come back to the breeding grounds to start the cycle again, to find a mate and breed, and then they just keep going to the south. And this seems like a perfect system, right? Like you are taking advantage of a lot of food in the north. When that food is gone, you go to the south. There's now a lot of food in the south. There is nice weather. You spend a few months there, get real fat, get a lot of energy, and then you come back again to the summer because there is not a lot of birds already in the breeding grounds, so they can't exploit all these new resources that are summer. However, migratory birds are declining. There is almost 3 billion birds that disappear from the continent in the last 50 years. So it's a big decline for migratory birds. And there are multiple reasons, right? There is habitat loss, that it's probably the first and most important factor that is driving migratory bird populations. And there is also climate change. We have climate change in the way of hurricane floods, and it's affecting the food resources, it's affecting migration speed, and it can have all sorts of impacts on migratory birds population. And from those environmental disturbances like hurricanes and floods, no other factor is as dramatic as wildfires. Wildfires can affect the life cycle of migratory species in many aspects. We can have effects on the breeding grounds, effects on the wintering grounds, and also along the migratory routes that these animals are following. However, not all the effects are the same. If you imagine that there is a fire in a breeding ground or an overwintering location from one of these species, a lot of areas where birds can go now that can offset the effects of they have to move to a different location. However, when these wildfires occur in the stopover sites, then the effects can be more pronounced because those birds are already in a lot of energy demands. They are already in a high risk. There's a lot of risk inherent to migration, even without fire. Without fire, birds still have to find food to fulfill the energy demands of long-distance flight. They have to navigate in unfamiliar terrain. They have to avoid predators and at the same time avoid competition by their own species and from the local species. So in this stopover sites that provide this energy, shelter, and places where these birds can rest and refuel, we have these fires. So because these birds are already in an energy constraint, it's very difficult for them to relocate to a different site to refuel the energy they are going to need. Because when they land in one of these stopover sites, sometimes they are almost depleted of energy. So finding a new spot for foraging is not something they want to do. And in fact, in some species, up to 90% of annual mortalities occur during migration. So think about it. So there's only 3 months that birds are en route, and 90% of those mortalities during the entire full annual cycle are going to occur during those 3 months of the year. So there is a lot of mortality. So if we add wildfire in top of this system, then we have a recipe for this population declines that we are observing in migratory. However, birds are not helpless. They have very good adaptations for completing that migration path. But I'm not going to show you this adaptation using a bird as a model. I'm going to use a human so we can better understand how birds are changing their bodies and their physiology to be able to complete long-distance migration. If we so what do we want to do? What do we have to do to be successful migrants? Well, first we have to get into something called muscular hypertrophy. That means that our muscles are going to grow by 50%. We're going to have very big muscles from in just a matter of days. We're going to increase the mass of muscles because we need to beat our wings to be able to complete those many hours long flights. Then we're going to get into something called hyperphagia. Hyper is a lot and phagia is eating. So it basically means eating a lot. So some birds almost duplicate their body mass before they start migration because they need a lot of energy. And in contrast to humans, they can use fat as a direct energy production. So they don't turn fat they don't use sugar like we do. They use fat, so they burn fat really fast. In contrast to us, like I'm still trying to lose my 2 pounds that I got from last Christmas. And another thing that birds do before they start flying is something called gut reduction. So basically, they reduce the size of their digestive system to a quarter of its original size. They do this because they need to complete migration, waiting as less as they can, but at the same time maximizing the energy stored they have. So they get a lot of fat, they get a lot of muscle, and they reduce the digestive system before starting the flight. Then they undergo something called selective muscular atrophy that typically involves reducing those muscles that they are not going to use during their migration flights. So this is how a migratory bird would, a migratory person would look if we are like birds. And then it's time to fly. So after a bird starts their flight, they are using their energy that they have stored in the way of fat. So when they get to a stopover site, they need to refuel that energy that they already burned. So they need to undergo again all these changes. They need to regrow their digestive system so they can start processing food again. And that takes several days. Then they need to start looking for food. They start again reducing the size of some muscles, reducing the gut, and they fly again. So as you can see, there is a lot of very complex processes going on and stopover sites that put birds in a very vulnerable position. If you can imagine, a very fat bird is more prone to predation. A very skinny bird is also very prone to predation because they are not moving a lot, or they are too desperate to get some food. So there's a lot of risk for birds during migration. So my research question is, what happened to birds when wildfire affect stopover sites? And if you think about it, if you have a chain of multiple stopover sites, and you have birds that stop at these sites, and it's more or less proportional, the food abundance is proportional to the number of birds that land in these stopover sites. When you have a fire in one of these stopover sites, birds are going to move to an adjacent stopover site. And then there's going to be an increasing competition. There's going to be probably more predation because now there's going to be more birds moving around, desperate for getting less food. And that can also just deplete food resources overall in that stopover site. So this is how I think fire is affecting the ecology of migrants. But this is important because wildfires in the West are increasing in size, severity, and frequency since a very long time now, like almost 50 years, that we see this trend of increasing fire in the landscape. But it's not enough to just compare. Well, there is an increase in fires in the West, there is a decrease in birds in North America. There should be a correlation here, right? There's going to be something going on there that is causing this decline. But it's not that easy. We need to find the mechanism. How are wildfires affecting how birds are either or not successful during migration? And this is very challenging because we're not going to see birds just bursting into flames into a wildfire. That's not how things are going to happen. So we need to be more creative and start thinking, how can we evaluate in a multiple levels what is going on with birds? Is it affecting individuals? Is it affecting population? Is it affecting communities? So this is how I think are the mechanisms of how wildfire is displacing migrants and then having effects on their body condition. So first, if we don't have fire in the landscape, then the habitats with a higher habitat quality are going to have more birds. And those sites with lower habitat quality, they're going to have lower numbers of birds. And this makes a lot of sense, right? That birds are going to find their spot in the landscape that can maximize their energy intake and reduce the risk of predation and starvation. But once we have a fire, those birds that land in those burned areas are going to move now to adjacent areas, because remember, they are in an energy constraint. So they are not going to move too far away. So this is going to increase the density in those sites that are adjacent to the fire boundary. And that is going to increase competition too. And competition in turn are going to be reflected in body condition. Remember again, body condition is particularly important for migratory birds because that's the currency. That's what they use to complete migration. It is a critical part of them to get that energy, to make less stops, to be able to cope with the changes in phenology and food resources caused by climate change. So they need that fat. They need that energy to be able to complete migration. And I think that the effect of fire are going to be also dependent on the burn area, with larger fires having a stronger effect, more severe fires having a stronger effect. And I think those effects are also going to dilute with time since fire. Like more recent fires are going to have a stronger effect. So we have an objective, we have an hypothesis that how this might be affecting birds. Now, where do we start? The easy way will be just capturing a bird, waiting that bird, letting it go, let it feed for a little while, a couple of days, and then recapture that bird and wait it again and just see whether they are gaining or losing weight. But that's not going to happen in a stopover site. You're never going to recapture a bird in a stopover site. It's very, very unlikely. So that's not going to work. So we do some things like transect surveys to collect some density of these birds, but body condition was still something that was causing some challenge for us, because just trying to estimate changes in body mass was not really going to work. So we found this technique, like in the same way we humans can measure blood glucose using some handheld meters, we can also tell whether a bird is gaining or losing weight using a blood sample. So we can just collect the blood sample, take a look at triglycerides and some ketone bodies, and just tell, oh, this bird is gaining weight or is losing weight with a single capture. So there is no need to recapture those animals. But then there's another challenge, that we can collect some of this data with these blood metabolites, but how do we really link these blood metabolites to where that bird actually was? And that is where Motus start taking a predominant role. So we start thinking about deploying these radio tags on birds that are part of this Motus network. I'm not going to be talking a lot about Motus like as a system, but I'm going to talk just the essentials. So Motus is this network of telemetry towers that can detect birds. So wherever these birds go, if there is a tower, then you're going to get a detection from those animals. So we decided to work with Western Tanagers for many reasons, but they are abundant. They are big enough to carry these antennas and these tags, and they're very charismatic. And in the places we were working, we were sure that they are migrants. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So as you can tell, these tags are really tiny. They are solar powered, so they can last many years. And it'll be very interesting to somebody to recite one of these birds and think that they are government surveillance drones. I know there's some people thinking about that, because now these birds have an antenna and a solar panel for recharging. So I want to see those conspirationists see some of my birds. So, well, the first step was to then find a place. Like when you do clinical trials, you have a control treatment. So our control treatment, where we don't have a fire, was the Cane River Preserve. The Cane River Preserve is this gorgeous area in along the south fork of the Cane River Valley, south fork of the Cane River, that is mostly cottonwood and willow riparian forest. It's one of the largest continuous riparian forests in Western United States. And it's beautiful. I recommend you guys going there and do some birding. So many things to see in the Cane River Preserve. There is an outbound Cane River Preserve there that I highly recommend to go birding there. And this site presented a lot of advantage for us. First, there was already a Motus project going there. Mary Whitfield, it's one of the big advocates for Motus in the West. So she started developing this, I think since 2017, she started working to put in these Motus towers in the area that can detect birds. But we wanted to do something more fine scale. This tower is good for telling us general location of the bird. It can tell us that it's in the Can River Preserve, but we want to have something a finer scale that we can really track the movements of these birds. So we got a generous donation from the San Fernando Valley Audubon Society to get some equipment for telemetry. So these boxes that you can see here are tracking nodes. You can use this, I don't know if you have ever seen the old telemetry equipment that it was like a giant radio and a giant handheld antenna, and you just like hike, just trek through the forest trying to you locate your bird. You never saw your birds. Well, this is like the next generation of that kind of technology. This our base stations, like miniaturized base stations, have a little computer that is detecting, picking up those radio tags, and then you can use those detections to triangulate the location of birds, and then being able to locate that bird with a 20 meters accuracy within your grid. We also got funding to deploy a new tower that was dedicated mostly to picking up the nodes, because the Can River Preserve is a large area. So we needed 2 towers to be able to pick up all the nodes that we were planning to detect. So we start in 2022 deploying our pilot project that consists of 18 nodes that we got from that donation. And we tagged some birds, we did some analysis, and then next year, in 2023, we expanded that node array to 51 nodes. So as you can see here, it's covering now most of the area that we were interested. And then we start collecting our data. So first, we need to have some data about density, about predation. So last year I was basically hiking around the preserve and georeferencing every single bird that I saw or here. So what you can see here is I think it's like 7,000 detection that I got last spring just to get this data on density. And then we start collecting some drone data. I know it doesn't look that impressive, but this is very detailed data on the vegetation structure. So we can use this to account for vegetation structure. Once we start doing our analysis, we just basically fly a toy drone over the preserve, and then we use those photos to create this 3D model of the preserve. And then we can basically tell each individual tree and what's its height and what's its cover, even from the little shrubs, as you can tell here in the little window. And then once we have all our data, it was time to start capturing birds. And capturing birds in the Can River Preserve is quite challenging. You can see Nidia here setting up a mist net, and that was a dry week, so to speak. So 2023 was a record-breaking in terms of the amount of water we got in the Can River Preserve. There was most of the time we were walking in chest deep water. It was very deep and very strong currents. So we were able to find some spots were dry, basically, where we are setting up the news net here. And we start capturing Western Tanagers. Again, we captured tanagers because they are big enough, they are abundant, they are pretty, but most importantly, because they do not overwinter, nor they breed in the Can River Preserve. We know they are true migrants here. They are just stopping over. They are not going to stay. So we were sure that those birds were just passing through. And we put the radio tags, we let them go. We got 16 birds, 8 in 2022, 8 in 2023. And then we just did some coding in the computer and we got this location of birds. So as you can tell here, every color is a different bird in a different day. So you can tell here that some of these birds were moving around the preserve. They're using very specific areas of the preserve. Now our next task is to use the data we collected before in terms of predators, density of other species, density of Western Tanagers, then productivity and the vegetation structure, and tell what are they looking for when they are selecting these patches in the forest, but also how is that affecting their body condition? Because we collect blood samples from these animals, so we can tell choosing these areas or that other area is affecting their body condition in such ways. We haven't done that analysis yet because immediately after we complete this spring, we start looking for another site to look for fires. And initially we thought that, well, we got a grant to work in Sequoia National Park and Sequoia National Forest from a nonprofit called Save the Redwoods League. But unfortunately, 2023 was a very high snow year. We weren't able to get to those sites. And this place is very important because there is every year there is well, the last 3 years we have the KNP complex and the Castle Fire that even kill some sequoias, like many sequoias, even when they are fire adapted. These fires were so severe, so extreme that they were killing sequoias. So we are interested to see whether the remaining sequoias are acting as a fire refugia for these birds and how those burned sequoias are also affecting the body condition of migrants. But we weren't able to do it last year. We're gonna try to do it this year. I'm crossing my fingers, so this is not gonna be an extremely wet year for California. But at the same time, I want it to be an extreme wet year for California because I like seeing the Kern River with a lot of water. So I'm kind of like divided them. So we take a step back. We took a step back and just trying to find another location where we can keep studying the effect of fire. So initially we thought that our birds that we tag in the Kern River Preserve, this red dot in the bottom, we're gonna follow Sierra Nevada and then the Cascades and then go probably into Canada. And here's one of the strengths of Motus. Or birds follow these weird movements and they went to Idaho and to Montana, but they did it going through the Great Basin, going through Death Valley, like all these very dry areas. And we were honestly very surprised that birds were doing that because we were expecting birds to follow the forest in the Sierras, but they didn't. So this just highlights how important is the Kern River Preserve for those birds, because crossing the Great Basin is not an easy task for a bird because there's not a lot of food. The peak of food resources is already gone at that time of the year. In May, June, that place is very dry. There's not a lot of food. And oh, I forgot to mention, in the Kern River Preserve, birds stay an average of 7 days. That is a very long stopover for migratory birds. In 2022, when it was drier, birds stay 9 days. And in 2023, birds stay an average of 5.1 days. And it was a very wet year. So we suspect that there is something going on with water availability that is making those birds move faster. But regardless of that, the Kern River Preserve is very important for these migrant Western Tanagers, because you can imagine how much energy these birds can get in 9 days or even 5 days, how much fat they can put on their bodies before crossing these very inhospitable areas in the Great Basin. So with this information that we got through the Motus network from other towers that detect our birds, we start looking at Eastern Oregon. Eastern Oregon is a very dry area. So we started writing some proposals to get some funding, and we got a fellowship from the Northwest Climate Adaptation Science Center to do some field work there. So last fall, we went to Oregon and we found a very different landscape than we were expecting from what we know in the Kern River Valley. Like, birds are not going through similar landscape. It's very steep terrain, but we did find some riparian forests, and we were surprised by the amount of diversity we had in those areas. So we started looking at, are these riparian forests acting as fire refugia for these migratory birds and also as thermal refugia? We think that because if you take a look at this video here, you can tell that the central riparian forest is way greener than the burn sites, the burn forest in the side. So it's more, we think it's more resilient to fire. It can recover faster from fires. You can tell here it's 2 years after the fire. There's already a lot of green in the riparian forest, a lot of shrubs, a lot of new trees coming. So we suspect that these areas are attenuating the effects of the negative effect of fire by allowing birds by harboring more density and giving more resources for those migratory birds. So we start working in this area. Again, we use the same technology. We use the tracking nodes now in a very different setting because it was very rude terrain. We basically just put those in the mountain tops. We also deploy some temperature loggers so we can tell whether those riparian forests are creating a warmer condition for those birds, and also whether the places within the fire are also being affected by having probably colder temperatures during the night. We did do this during fall 2023. And we also started to expand our research into other migratory species. We didn't put tags on these other migrants, but we started collecting some blood samples. We also want to understand how fire is affecting these birds, even when we do not have telemetry data. We can still georeference the place where we are finding the birds, how far is away from the fire, get a density estimation through a transect survey, and then collect blood samples, and then try to relate that body condition to what we are seeing in terms of environmental variables. The results are not ready for this research either, but because we're getting ready for our next spring season. So in this spring, we are going to go back to Oregon. We're going to go to Sequoia National Park, Sequoia National Forest to do our surveys again in places where there are fires. But in this area in Oregon, we did find that regardless of the size of the riparian forest, it can be 30 meters, 40 meters wide riparian forest. It can be just a narrow strip of riparian vegetation. We did find that there is higher diversity, there is higher density of animals in these areas. So we, again, this is not finished, but we suspect that these areas are really due harboring more birds, are acting as fire refugia. So this is led us to ask ourselves how this research, how our findings can aid bird conservation. So first, we can inform forest wildfire management so we can maintain or create higher quality stopover sites for these migratory birds by trying to make some prescribed burns to reduce the severity of those fires or to avoid fires in critical areas. This will also, because there's this increase predicted in fire severity, size, and frequency, this information will help us to try to predict how birds will respond to further habitat change. And also will help us to identify those species that are particularly vulnerable to habitat change. In addition, this information is revealing to us a lot of data, and these tagged birds are going to keep just giving us data in years to come. Remember, those tags are solar, and as long as that bird is alive and moving through the landscape, you're going to be able to recite it again using the Motus network. So here we have the spring migration routes from 2022 and 2023 data, and in the right we have the fall migrations from last year. All of these birds are, I hope, they are alive. They are overwintering in Mexico. The southernmost we got is very close in Sinaloa, Mexico. And we expect that this spring we're gonna get all these birds again, and they are gonna pass through some of these banding Motus towers, and you're gonna get redetection of those again. And we are very excited, really looking forward to see how these migratory routes are gonna look in the future. We're gonna keep putting more tags. We have 15 tags more to put in Oregon and 15 more tags to put in California this year. So we're very excited to see that. There's also some bonus data, like in the Cannon River Valley, we do some yellow-billed cuckoo surveys. And this is very exciting because we have a protocol to follow when we are doing these surveys. So you can see here, these 3 surveyors. Each one of these green dots is a surveyor using playbacks. And they are just get to a point, do a playback, and then just move 100 meters, do another 5 playbacks, move another 500 meters. And then you have Hamas here. That is a yellow-billed cuckoo we could attack. You can see the orange dots there are moving towards one of the surveyors. Then that surveyors detect that bird. And the birds keep moving around. Then surveyor 2 detect the same bird. And they know it was the same bird because they were communicating by radio. But that same morning, that bird moved more than 500 meters to bother another surveyor. And the cool thing here is that we can tell now that these 3 detections that otherwise will be 2 independent detection that we will think that there was 2 birds in the area. Now, by tracking this yellow-billed cuckoo, we can tell and refine our protocols, our survey protocols, to be able to create new ways of how interpret this data. So this is changing a lot of how we think about yellow-billed cuckoos. This bird was originally banded. You can see my cursor, like way down here. That was their home range. Basically, it was where it was breeding. It probably had a nest in that area. But it was just wandering around all the preserve. All this movement you can see here right now is just one day, one morning this bird was around. And then all the surveyors leave the area around midday. And this bird just came back again and started moving all over the place. So this is really changing how we think about yellow-billed cuckoos. It's uncovering a lot of things about their movement, about their ecology. And we also have long-distance migration data for this yellow-billed cuckoo. But I forgot to put it here. But if you use your phone to scan some of this code, you're going to be able to see the tracks that are going to be are being updated every single day. If we have one detection, you're going to see that detection no matter when you see it. So if you go to these sites that are linked to the Motus website, you're going to be able to see our Western Tanager tracks or yellow-billed cuckoo tracks. And also on the right, there is the page for the Southern Silver Research Station, where you can learn more about what we do, the research we are doing, and the very cool projects that we have active. And I think with that, it's everything I have. There is a lot of people to say gracias, institutions, agencies, and of course, birds. And with that, I will take any questions you may have.
All right. Can you stop share or when you get a chance? Sorry.
Yes, let me try. Oh, it's in my other screen. Sorry, just a minute. There you go.
So Marianne, are you there to relay questions to him now?
Yeah, I'm just frantically scribbling the last bit of Pat's question here. Okay, got it. All right, yeah, we have actually quite a few. So here we go. Mark asked, Edwin, why is the northern migrating route primarily east of the Rocky Mountain chain?
Yeah, it's very interesting question that we haven't been able to fully answer. As I say, we were quite surprised that this bird started moving following the Great Basin area. They're forest species. So we were expecting them to honestly just follow the southern Sierras, probably about the foothills, and just go all the way up to Oregon and Washington. We were very surprised they were going through the desert. I don't know why they are doing that. It might be that there's some genetic component that they just breed in in Montana or Idaho, and then they just follow that route. It might be that they are just taking advantage that probably not others, not all, and there's not many other species that are taking that same route, so there is less competition. Probably the weather is nicer. They're probably taking advantage of some airstreams, like meteorological currents that are probably helping them migrate. We really don't know. That's one of the next steps in our research. We don't have a lot of data so far of migratory routes to be able to do a strong analysis. But we're expecting that in the years to come, we're gonna keep getting these migratory tracks, and then we're gonna have eventually enough data so we can perform a proper analysis to be able to find the reasons why those birds are following those routes.
Okay. Richard asks, are the migration maps you showed at the beginning specific for Western Tanagers, or is it a generalized overview of migration in the Americas?
Yeah, I was using just Western Tanager as an example. That is the range of Western Tanagers and not the overall view of migration in the Americas.
All right. Let's see. Bill pointed out that the LA Zoo just installed a Motus unit list last year. It'll be interesting to see what they're tracking. Let's see. Pat asked, do you see a role for urban habitat restoration supporting the migration, or does it just skirt the urban areas?
No, absolutely. There is a lot of potential for urban areas to be able to hold birds. Even putting the feeders in the backyards can have a big impact on some of these species. There are some risks, of course. You have like these diseases that can spread in feeders, but if you keep them very clean and you are like keeping an eye on the news, whether there is an outbreak that year or in that part of the country, you don't want to contribute to that. But definitely there is a lot of potential for keeping even urban parks, tiny forests, patches of forest in the middle of the city. Those can be very helpful for these birds because sometimes they're not looking for getting really fat in some of these stopover sites. Sometimes they just want to rest over the day. So they need a place to land. They need a place to stay over the day. Sometimes just avoid rain, harsh weather. So they don't have to be on the most pristine areas to be for those stopover sites to be helpful for birds. Of course, there are some parks that have a lot of cats, for example, and those can be a trap for some of these birds. I remember the Hart Park in Bakersfield, that there's so many cats in that park. And I was concerned, like I really wanted to do some study there, but it's never time. But it was very interesting to see how many cats there was in this area. But it's just a part of like, yes, urban stopover sites are important. There are some studies that show that the refueling rate, it's similar in some parts in New York versus the forest. Like they are getting the same energy in those two habitats. They are both acting, getting positive effects on migrants. So definitely a lot of room for urban sites for provide high quality stopover habitats for migrants.
Okay. Well, as usual, my last question is, what do you need? What's your dream now? What do you want to do next, and how can we help?
Yeah, I want to start getting stronger inference in my data. As scientists, there is like, we always feel like, oh, needs more studies in this, more studies in that. We need a bigger sample size. So there's two things I want to do. So first one is getting a stronger study that I hope getting more data from these birds is going to help us. And then I am currently working. I got a fellowship from the Northwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. That it's basically how you work with stakeholders from land management agencies to translate your research into policies, into management, into how you ground your research, how you pass from basic research into useful and usable research that they can use. So I'm working with the BLM in Oregon. I'm working with the Forest Service in California, with the National Park in California, to try to create products that they can use to protect birds, to enhance habitats for them. It's quite challenging. Let me tell you, it's like a lot of things. There is so many things to consider, so many interests, so many interest parties in making these things possible. But I really do want to make a change in focusing my career towards more management oriented. And of course, I love research, and I do have this curiosity to try to find the patterns, try to see the effects, and to work in my computer and then find the trend line, all that kind of stuff. I really love that, but I wanted to translate that into actions. That would be my dream, like having a real impact in bird conservation and in general in wildlife conservation, not just birds. I think I have a special place in my heart for birds.
Oh, Edwin, I think there's a couple more questions. I don't know if Marianne saw them, from Lucy and Carla and Trevor and Teresa. And I just want to kind of summarize real quick. As far as the riparian zones, do you see the difference in the wildfires versus non-riparian, and do they migrate at night in the desert or during the day? And then what native plant species can we plant to support Western Tanagers? I don't know if I can go over them again after, anyway.
Sure. Let me try to respond, Lucy, first. So there, I am surveying in Oregon particularly. I have different transects. I have one transect within the fire, within the burn area. And they have multiple fires outside the fire. And in some areas, the transect that I choose within the fire is a riparian forest. So I am comparing riparian burned versus unburned, and also non-riparian burned versus unburned. I have all the different gradients of through this different transect that I'm placing in the landscape. So yes, I'm comparing all these different areas. So Western Tanager, I'm studying Western Tanagers. So Western Tanagers, and I suspect summer tanagers too, they migrate always at night. So one of the good things of having a solar and battery power radio tag is that we can tell the exact time that bird left or stopped oversight. So most of our birds are leaving the area around 11 p.m. So a little before midnight, they start flying, they leave the area, and then we have a few detections along the way that they are getting, like, let's say in the Kern National Wildlife Refuge, then very close to Fresno. And then right before sunrise, a couple hours before sunrise, they land and they stay there for that day. So they do not migrate during the day. There's many reasons why they don't migrate during the day. One of them is navigation. They use the stars, they use the moon to navigate. Another is to avoid overheat during the day. So they make sure that they can they fly nonstop, and if they try to do that during the day, they probably will get dehydrated. So they do it at night. They avoid predation. They have nicer weather during the day. You know, when you're in a flight, there are less turbulence during the night than it is during the day. So they use kind of like the same cues for completing their migrations. And then final question was,
what can we plant? Do they eat seeds? Do they eat fruit? What do they eat?
Yeah, so in the spring, they eat mostly insects. But I have seen them eating little cottonwood pods, like, you know, before they bloom. there's like this little fruit in the cottonwood trees. So I saw them eating those. So I'm not sure if they also eat a lot of fruit during the spring, but in general, during the spring migration, there are not a lot of fruits on migration, on the migratory routes. So they eat mostly insects, but during the fall, they switch their diet a lot and they start eating more fruit. So they start eating a lot of berries. So if you want to plant something that you can eat and birds can eat, plant a lot of berries and try to choose native berries. I think huckleberries are one big one that they eat. And yeah, just basically native berries will help migratory birds a lot. You'll see tanagers, you'll see the waxwing, just destroying them in a few hours. But you're gonna get a lot of birds if you plant any berry that contains a lot of water. They're gonna make sure that they're gonna get a lot of food.
Sounds good. And then there's just one other person who raised their hand, Z. I don't know if she or he has a question. Did you want to ask a question, Z? Do you want to unmute? I'm not sure.
Yes, yes. My question is regarding the installation of the towers. What has that process been like for you? And I guess what are the processes that you have to get that approved? I guess like what agencies do you have to connect with to install that? And what has been potentially some challenges in its installations? Yeah,
Okay,
That's
yeah,
my-
that's a great
one of my
question.
questions.
Yeah, I think the main issue, you don't need any permission to deploy one of these towers because they are not transmitting. So if you want to put one in your backyard, you are free to do it. You don't have to file any permit. You don't have to do anything. You just deploy the tower. Just make sure that it's not going to fall on people, that nobody is going to hit it, like if it's a plane that's too tall or something. But you don't, in principle, you don't need any permission. You do need some knowledge on electricity and in building structures like metal structure or concrete structures, because you need these towers to be high from the ground, and then they have these big antennas. So it requires some using some tools and cutting some cables. The main challenge, I feel, is not in the installation per se, but it's in the funding part. These things are expensive. They can cost anything from $10,000 to $15,000 to set up one Motus tower. So I think that will be probably the biggest challenge, that they are not that accessible. In terms of installing, there is many ways. There's many tutorials you can see in the internet. There is one big provider that is Cellular Tracking Technologies that is producing these computers that you can connect to the cables and antennas and then detect the birds. But there is a lot of very good resources, a lot of there are some workshops you can take also on how to build these towers. Yeah, I think that to me will be the biggest challenge. I don't know if Mary wants to contribute here. She has been working with Motus way more than I have been, and probably she knows more about the challenge. But in principle, I would say like funding and just putting your finding places where you want to deploy these towers, and then just getting the right person to install them or learning how to install them.
So Edwin,
Yep.
I wanted to acknowledge one comment that came in under chat from Reed at the Audubon Kern River Preserve. He's congratulating you on your work there. It's been helpful for them in developing the site, both getting funding toward expanding the protected areas and restoring habitat. So we're happy to participate in that as well. I did have a couple of questions, scientific questions. The nodal array of, I think you said you're up to 51 nodes at the Kern River Preserve. Are those still in place? And Are you monitoring them for the return or pass back through of the birds that you tagged there? And how is that going?
Yeah, we don't leave the nodes over the winter because there's a lot of rain and they are sensitive electronic components, so we don't want to leave them to the cold and rain. We do keep the main tower on all the time, so it is picking up the birds all the time. We have two towers, so we have some redundancy in the area. However, the node array, I have to take it to Oregon because we have a limited number of those nodes. So I took 36 of those nodes to my study site in Oregon. Right now, they're just waiting to be deployed in Sequoia National Park and Forest. And the 15 original nodes we got from you guys are still in SSRS, and they're going to be redeployed this spring to keep tracking of those birds. While I'm taking the other ones to work in Sequoia National Park, and then I'll take those to Oregon to the other study site.
So you talked about the number of birds that you tagged. I think you said 8 and 8 Western Tanagers. Is that correct? And you're expecting them to appear back at SSRS when?
Yeah, I need to be more precise about the number. I put 8 and 8, 2022, 2023 in the Kern River Preserve, and I had 9 more in Oregon in last fall. So I have 25 total. There are 15 more to come, not 30 more, 30 more to come. So I do expect them to come back, to be honest. I think they have some site fidelity. I don't know it for sure. From the birds we tagged in 2022, we have a defective batch of tags. So I suspect that for all of them, the antenna fell from the main body of the tag. So those tags only work for probably a month, and then they just fail, all of them. So we're not expecting to redetect birds from 2022. If it happens, it'll be great, but we don't expect it to happen. But we do expect to have some redetection for the birds from 2023, and we expect them to be very much in April, May. So if you guys keep an eye on the links that I provide for taking a look at the tracks, you'll see them when they come. If there's a new detection, you'll see those detection in those maps.
Okay, and you're expanding beyond Western Tanagers, or are we going to other species yet?
Hopefully, I mean, that'll be amazing to be able to put tags on more birds. At this moment, it's just funding what it's making us constrained in terms of how many tags we put on those birds. But as long as eventually we're gonna start tagging more birds. That's the idea, that we're gonna put more tags in yellow-billed cuckoos. I also want to be working on Swainson's thrush and hermit thrush. And just have a wider idea, because yes, Western Tanagers are very interesting species and can be an indicator species, but we can put tags on more species to get a better understanding of bird migration in the West.
Is your current approval for birds in general, or specifically to Western Tanagers? You have to get more approvals for different species?
It is just a matter of sending an email to the bird banding lab from the USGS. It's just a thing of a couple of weeks to get the approvals. I do have the approvals from the university, from in the IACUC protocol to put tags on many species, but not from the bird banding lab. But I do have master bird bander permit, so I can request at any time changes to my protocol, and they work diligently to have it done quickly.
Well, it sounds very exciting. I really enjoyed hearing all about it. Looking forward to seeing more lines on that map. And as far as they go down into Mexico and as far as they go up in North America here. I really like to do that, and I'm hoping that is that what we're going to see when we scan your QR codes?
Exactly. Yeah, you're gonna see those lines, and if there are more detections, you're gonna see those. That link is gonna be valid for a long time, and it's gonna be keep updating with the same data I am able to see in the computer. That's the same data you can see from those links.
Okay. Well, I'm looking to flex my QR muscles here. Well,
I can also put send in an email the full codes. If you guys want to try that, I just felt like it was easier just to take a photo on your phones. And yeah, I'm very excited to complete this project. And if you guys invite me again to give a talk, I can present the full results of this project probably by the end of this year, early next year. I expect to have the more in-depth analysis, not just more lines, but also trying to find those mechanisms that are affecting or probably not affecting those migratory birds in terms of fire.
Consider the preliminary invitation already there and done. I'll talk more with you later.
Excellent.
Sounds great.
Well, thank you so much, Edwin, for your enthusiasm. And it makes me feel hopeful for the future when people like you are working on these conservation issues. And yeah, and I second what Richard said about having you back. And did you want to say anything else, Richard or Kathy or anyone?
I would just like to thank Edwin again. That was very interesting and again, very hopeful. And remind everyone to join us next month for our next programming, which is Wen-Fei Kong, speaking about bird love, where she will provide fascinating facts on bird behavior. I want to highlight that meeting will be at 5 p.m. I gathered to accommodate Wen-Fei. I assume she's on the East Coast. So
Yes.
5 p.m., not 7 p.m. And that is February 22. And I hope to see you all there. And thank you all for coming. And thank you again, Edwin.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you,
Edwin.
guys.
Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
And thank you, Richard, for hosting.
No, thank you. All right.
Yes,
Good.
and thank you for Richard for taking care of getting Edwin to talk with us.
Okay, good.
All right.
All right. Have a good night. Look forward to seeing as many of you as possible next month. All right.
Thank you. Bye.
See you again.
All right. Bye. Bye-bye.